But let me tell you something. This movie said you better put some respect on airbending. And watching this film made me realize Avatar Aang, The Last Airbender. Let's get into it. Y'all, I was watching this movie and I was feeling like a proud auntie when they showed that new intro and they were transitioning from children to adults while bending. And then also in the very beginning when Aang was talking to Appa and Momo, and I was just like, who is this? Like, where did this bass in your voice come from? It was just giving me all of the feelings and I was just feeling hella nostalgic. Aww. So in the beginning of the movie, we're seeing that the gang is all grown up. All right, everybody has gone off and they are pursuing their passions after the 100-year war has finally ended. As I was watching Aang go around and hunting for little artifacts, I thought to myself, like, I couldn't do it. I simply could not be the last airbender. It is just way too much stress and way too much work. Like, what do you mean that I have to rebuild my entire civilization, my entire culture, while being the avatar as a side hustle? Shout out to Aang. He's doing his big one. It could never be me. So for those of us who have watched the film, we all know that Aang's run-in with the Denied is what sends him on his adventure to retrieve Sonam's staff. And in order to do that, the first thing Aang has to do, or ends up doing, is busting out Tagah from the ice. And let me tell y'all something. When I saw Tagah, I was just like, ooh, I might have a new problematic cartoon crush. You know, I might have to push Omni-Man aside. I love one of the ways that we're kind of acknowledging that the gang is now, you know, a group of adults, is that everybody was able to acknowledge how fine Tagah is, especially Toph. Like, the way Toph was acting was how I was feeling. Now, as fine as Tagah is, the gang was not asking enough critical questions for me. Like, I understand that Aang was very excited to see another airbender. It's been over a century since, you know, he's seen somebody like him or from his culture, but they just weren't asking the critical questions. You know, why were you in the ice? Who put you in the ice? Why did you want to fight Toph when you saw her? Like, why was it on sight? Do you have beef with earthbenders? If so, why? What is your workout routine? Are you single? You know, they just weren't getting down to the nitty gritty enough for my liking. Anyway, they decide to follow Tagah to the ends of the earth because, you know, bae, I get it. When they hit that immortal storm, that's where even Tagah's fineness would have hit its limit for me. Because what do you mean I have to go through all of that in order to get Sonam's staff? Like, I'm not going back there. I'm simply not doing it. And let me tell you something, the air bending train would have stopped right then and there with me. Now, while the journey through the immortal storm gave us some peak upper echelon bending, I have to give the MVP award to Katara, because my girl decided to get her Moses on and part that sea like it was nothing. Like, do y'all remember Katara at the very beginning of Avatar: The Last Airbender? Baby girl could barely even bend a water droplet, and now she's just splitting the ocean in half like it's nothing. I'm just so proud of her. Proud auntie. Proud auntie. That's how I was feeling the entire movie. And I feel like maybe a lot of people got mad at Aang after, you know, the whole navigating the immortal storm situation, because it's clear at this point, if it wasn't already, that Tagah, you know, he's an unsavory dude. He's not that great. But even at this point, I couldn't even get that frustrated or blame Aang, because he made a very good point when he was arguing with Katara and, you know, everybody else. He was just like, you basically don't know what it feels like to have your entire family and culture and civilization wiped out. And so it made sense to me that he was almost like blindly following Tagah, because he had so much hope in his heart that he would be able to restore and bring back the airbenders to the world, and the staff was the way to do it. So I get his blind faith. I get his, you know, naivety in this situation. I couldn't even really hold it against Aang. Now, once we make it to wherever they were going, I can't remember the name of the place, but the, you know, the oasis with the giant sea lion turtles, that's where we see, you know, Tagah fight Katara, Zuko, Sokka, and Toph. And prior to this movie, if you had asked me what the coolest element was to bend, I would have told you earth. I love earth bending. I still do. But let me tell you something, this movie said you better put some respect on airbending. And watching this film made me realize that we're so used to seeing Aang's style of airbending. Aang is the type of airbender where he would use his, you know, his powers, his bending to evade versus attack. And yes, I know that we have airbending in The Legend of Korra as well, but we've never seen someone quite like Tagah, a highly skilled airbender who uses their airbending to kill. Tagah was giving everyone that work, including Aang in the Avatar state. And basically, if they hadn't gotten lucky, if Katara hadn't gotten lucky and been able to heal everyone, they would have been goners. So let's jump forward to that final battle that happens in Republic City. I'm not sure how I felt about that. You know, minus Aang, who was fighting Tagah, understandably so. the rest of the gang was fighting the Denied. So you're telling me that we have the Denied who basically have a, I don't know, kindergarten level airbending education take on Katara, Zuko, and Toph. And on top of that, they're going to put up a pretty decent fight. That doesn't really make any sense to me. And I guess if the three of them had just, smashed the Denied, it wouldn't have been that interesting. But it's a fight that should not have been fair, but it ended up being pretty fair in my opinion. And ultimately, it was great seeing Aang defeat Fine Tagah and bringing, restoration and balance back into the world as the Avatar is supposed to do. And I think an important thing that Aang learned from this whole ordeal is that, unfortunately for him, bringing back airbenders wasn't going to be as simple as, the wave of, quite literally in this movie, a magical wand. If he was going to recruit people to be a part of, the civilization or culture, it was going to be people who truly felt passionately about the cause as well. All right, now, I know that we love Avatar: The Last Airbender around here. I totally get that. So what I have to say next might ruffle some feathers, but I'm gonna say it anyway. And it's fine if you disagree. It's fine if you agree. Just keep it cute. I felt like the story was pretty straightforward and pretty predictable. It just didn't go quite as in depth as I'm used to Avatar going. And I understand that a movie, it's very different from a TV show. You only have an hour and a half. And there's a lot to cram in that short amount of time versus the TV show spanned over, a couple years. There were multiple seasons and there were a lot of episodes, but it didn't quite give the character development and some of the enlightenment that I'm used to seeing from this franchise as a whole. So I think that there was kind of a miss. There are a few storylines that I would have liked to have gone deeper into, especially around the Denied, because in Avatar: The Last Airbender, there never really was an issue between someone being a bender and somebody not being a bender. We actually see that in Legend of Korra. That does become an issue, but I think the seeds at least started getting planted with the Denied in this movie. And I would have loved to have had a little more insight into why it was so difficult for the Denied being non-benders. There was like a little, sprinkle of insight here and there, but that was something at the beginning of the movie that I was hoping would go deeper, but it didn't really go beyond that. It was pretty surface level. I also wanted more on Toph, Sokka, Katara, and Zuko and what their lives were looking like after the 100-Year War. The story was very much focused on Aang, understandably so. I think I would have wanted just a little more backstory and insight for the rest of the gang on how life had changed and shifted for them. Again, I understand it's only an hour and a half, so we could only do so much, but hopefully that's something we can get a little more insight into later on. One thing that Avatar will never let me down on are the fight scenes. Avatar has some of the best action scenes just across television and film, animated and live action. They always get it right. And for this movie, honestly, there was only one thing that I cared about. One thing. And that was actually something that stemmed from Legend of Korra. And it was, where did Oogie come from? Because if Appa was, the last flying bison, it made no sense to me that Oogie was just there on the Legend of Korra. And from what I remember, they never really provided an answer on how he came to be. And so that was just something that has always been just gnawing at me. And all I cared about was this movie answering that question, and it did. So I was a happy girl. And I'm just so excited that we are back in this world again because it's been a hot minute. Let me know in the comments if you have watched Avatar: Aang, The Last Airbender. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I definitely want to hear it. Also, side note, how much do y'all love this hat, okay? See?